Tell me about your problems, please. I want to hear. I want to help. You see, I am a member of a brotherhood of unfortunate men. Women consume our thoughts, don't they? We can't get girls to pay attention to us. We don't know how to entertain them once we catch their eye. We don't know how to make them happy after they decide our pathetic souls are worth their troubles. We are lost at sea, adrift. We all have our problems. It's just that my problems are worse than yours. Twice as bad, actually. Sorry, I'm being selfish. I'm not looking for sympathy, really. I see lonely people and my heart hurts because I know what they are missing. I know how wonderful it is to love someone and receive love in return. I couldn't be more deeply in love than I am right now. I'm hopeless. The fact that this love is based on lies, deceit, and my willingness to ignore reality does not change anything. I'm in love. I'm in love and everything will be fine for a few more weeks before the truth comes out and my life changes forever. How I would like to close my eyes and isolate myself from the whole world. But now, it's too late. I have to explain. A Friday night in April and going to bars didn't appeal to me. I wanted silence, and I got it. A good book in a comfortable chair and no one to distract me. But around 9 o'clock, I had a strong urge to eat mint chocolate chip ice cream. I couldn't get rid of it. I just had to eat some. So 10 minutes later, I was in the supermarket, stomping down the frozen food aisle. The glass door of the freezer was open. Another snack lover was rummaging around in search of a quart of the creamy treat. The glass was so foggy that I couldn't see who it was, and I tapped my foot, patiently waiting for my turn. The door slowly slammed shut, and it was like a curtain rising as actors take the stage. She looked up, saw me watching, and gave me a sweet, serene smile, and all thoughts of ice cream flew out of my head. It was love at first sight. I mean love, not lust, not a chemical imbalance polluting my brain. It was Cupid's arrow, straight to my heart. She was wearing old jeans and a gray sweatshirt, and her dark brown hair was pulled back into a ponytail. She was the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. She was tall and very slender, and her skin was as flawless as porcelain. Her eyes were dark blue, like the deep ocean. She looked like a porcelain doll. But she looked me straight in the eyes, and her frank smile told me that she was not a doll. She was definitely a real girl. "Looks like I'm not the only one with a sweet tooth," she said in a flute-like voice, showing me 2 pints of butter pecans. Uh-huh, I said. She was so beautiful that I just stared at her until she asked me what flavor I was looking for. "It doesn't matter," I said, shocked by her beauty. We chatted for a few minutes. I don't remember what we talked about, but she was sweet and kind and laughed at my lame jokes. We finally made it to the checkout and paid for our items. Her car was parked on one side, mine on the other. "It's now or never, buddy." I know this sounds crazy. I don't hit on girls in grocery stores, but would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Or coffee? Or ice cream? Or with pleasure? Her smile was completely guileless, showing off each of her purely perfect teeth. Every time she smiled, tiny wrinkles would form around her dark blue eyes, and it just shocked me. It gave me butterflies. It was one of those rare, perfect moments in life that you know you'll treasure forever. Perfect. "Sorry, I don't even know your name." "I'm Mike." I extended my hand. She paused. "I'm Lynn." Her cool fingers lay in my palm. We exchanged phone numbers and shyly said goodbye. I got into the car and sat there for a long time, pressing the hand that touched Lynn to my face. I was so far away. I returned home to my empty apartment and bumped into walls for an hour. I had to tell someone what happened. I knew my friend Rick was gone for the night, but I dialed his number and left a message. "Ricky, I just met the most amazing, incredible, beautiful girl in the world." It turned out that I was only half right. I called her on Saturday. She was free. We agreed on a date. All day I was like a child whose parents told him they were going to Disneyland. Tomorrow. Overexcited. Bounced off the walls. You know when you ask a girl out on a date, a girl you just met, you really don't have a good idea of what she looks like? That is, you find her attractive enough to take the risk of asking her out. But when you close your eyes and try to picture her, she's still vague. It was the same with Lynn. I knew she was beautiful, but when I dreamed about her, about kissing her, making love to her, which I did all day. I could not focus on her. So when I rang the doorbell at her house, I was rocking back and forth on my toes with anticipation. I couldn't wait to meet her. And when the door opened, and she appeared, again in jeans and with her hair in a ponytail, I sighed like a loving calf. "Hello, Lynn." She smiled at me with her megawatt smile, the corners of her eyes crinkling like the night before, her perfect teeth sparkling like little white stones. "I'm not Lynn," she giggled. For a moment, my brain didn't work. "Isn't she Lynn? It's not calculable. Isn't this the angel I met last night?" For a sickening second, I thought this was some cruel way to fight back at me. "I'm Amy," she said. "Sister Lynn. Sister—" The voice in my head sounded like Darth Vader when he reads Luke's thoughts and learns the truth about Princess Leia. Um, I guess she didn't tell you she had a twin?" "No." She giggled musically. "I didn't mean to scare you like that. Come on in. Identical twins. What do you know?" I followed Amy up the stairs and resisted the urge to kiss her. I was shocked. I fell in love with Lynn the moment I saw her. I felt exactly the same rush of bliss when I saw Amy. Was I in love? Crazy? When Amy turned and asked me to sit down and my stomach did a somersault, I knew I was in trouble. "How's your ice cream?" I asked. Exactly what I wanted. We were watching the movie, Lynn looked at me, and we said at the same time, "Creamy pecan." She lost in a coin toss to determine who should go to the grocery store. Coin toss. If it had come up heads instead of tails, I would have asked Amy out the night before. I would be talking to Lynn right now. What if they went together? Would I choose one over the other? I felt guilty even thinking about it. They were two personalities, two different people who turned out to be very similar to each other. I looked at Amy and decided that I was old enough to consider her the sister of the girl I was crazy about. I was mentally patting myself on the back when I heard a soft voice behind me. "Hello, Mike." The most beautiful girl in the world stood at the door. Her hair fell in copper waves to her shoulders. Her blue eyes shone like stars. Her lips were the same pale purple color as the loose-fitting blouse she wore. It took my breath away. I stood on shaky legs. "You look great." She smiled. Her smile was exactly the same as Amy's, right down to the wrinkles around her eyes. I looked at Lynn, then at Amy, then back at Lynn. "I probably should have warned you," Lynn said with a familiar chuckle. "Of course, identical twins look alike, that's the whole point. But even twins have subtle differences here and there that make one person too unique." Lynn and Amy, as far as I could tell, were completely identical. It was only the second time I had seen Lynn and her twin for the first time, but the effect was amazing. It was as if they could teleport across the room. I looked that way, and she was sitting in the living room. I looked that way, and she was standing in the doorway. "Warned me about what?" I asked. They both laughed, and it was creepy. They laughed exactly the same way. Their faces took on the same expression. But what beautiful faces. Lynn and I went out to dinner, then took a long walk in the local park and talked for hours. I learned that Lynn's parents died when the twins were 2 years old, and they were raised by their maternal grandmother. He and Amy both taught 3rd grade in neighboring school districts. And yes, she knew how amazingly similar she and her sister were. "Even our friends have difficulty distinguishing us." "Have you ever had different hairstyles? Have you ever dyed your hair?" "I like my hair the way it is now, and so does Amy." "Don't you?" I told her that yes. I told her that to change her beautiful hair in any way would be a crime against humanity. I thought she would laugh, but she didn't. There was a sudden, serious silence. We stopped under a lamppost. The sun was setting. It was a magnificent evening. She looked at me, waiting for me to do what I wanted to do all evening. "I'm very glad I met you last night," I said. "Me too." I leaned over. She leaned over. And we kissed. It was a quick kiss. Just a few seconds of my lips touching hers. She put her hand on my shoulder, and I put mine on her thigh. "I think I like you," she said. Very. I think I like you too. We kissed again, this time a little longer. When we parted, she ran her thumb over my lips. Lipstick. We walked back to the car hand in hand. I wanted to tell her that I love her. I wanted to ask her to marry me. I wanted to jump on the roof of my car and make monkey noises. Instead, I drove her home and walked her to the door. I had a great time, she said. Me too. Will you call me again? Are you kidding? Maybe I'll call you from the entrance before I leave. She giggled, then her face became serious, and we kissed goodnight. When she walked through the door, I saw Amy sitting in the living room. She smiled and waved at me. I waved back. Bye, Lynn said. I lingered on the threshold with my eyes closed, enjoying the moment. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard a voice outside the door. There was a chuckle, and then a faint voice. Do you like him too? That was the word, Sammy, which threw me into confusion. I was already a little shocked by my reaction to meeting Amy. Does she really like me? It seemed, at the same time, too strange and too good to be true. As I walked back to the car, I thought about this. Perhaps Lynn had described me to Amy, and now that we had met, Lynn wanted Amy's opinion. This made sense. It's just, something didn't give me peace. When it dawned on me, I was approaching an intersection and almost ran a red light. The voice that I heard, it was weak, much weaker than a giggle. It must have been Amy who asked the question. Why would Amy ask Lynn if she likes me? Same? It didn't make sense. Maybe I misheard. But that's not true. I was sure I heard Amy. And what did that mean? I came home, undressed, lay down under the covers and decided that it didn't mean anything. I was in love. I met the girl I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I fell asleep, dreaming of the day when Lynn would lay next to me and cuddle me all night long. It was the easiest night I've known. On Sunday, I called Lynn around 11. Hearing her voice, hearing her laugh at my jokes, I put all my worries out of my head. I want to see you, and I said, do you know where I live? I can be there in 15 minutes. Then why are we still talking on the phone? 18 minutes later, I was sitting on the couch. Lynn was sitting on my lap, and we were kissing. My hands rested on her tiny waist, moving millimeters towards her breasts. It happened so quickly, she said. Too fast? She kissed me deeply. Not fast enough. I let my hand move up, until my palm rested on her breast. She closed her eyes. Her breasts were small and firm, and she wasn't wearing a bra. I've never felt this way about a girl before, I said. Not so fast. She kissed me. She then ran her thumb over my lips. Lipstick. If she had slapped me, I wouldn't have been so shocked. She did the exact same thing last night. Similar, but it wasn't the same. There was something wrong with this gesture. I couldn't explain. Of course, she can do the same thing 2 days in a row. I liked it when she did it the night before. I liked it even now. But it wasn't the same. I looked into her sparkling blue eyes and felt like I was looking at a stranger. It wasn't Lynn. It was Amy. I was sure of it. She leaned over, we kissed, and a shiver ran through my body. What is this? She asked. Nothing, I said, but I couldn't control my face or my voice. Honey, what? I thought about honest lies. I almost said those 3 little words, but it's too early for that. I touched her cheek with my fingertips. She looked at me with such tenderness that it broke my heart. This is too early. I know, I interrupted. But now that you look so beautiful, I can't stop my feelings. She took my hand, lifted my shirt, and pressed it to her bare chest. It's hard for me, too. The room spun around me. I didn't know if it was Lynn or Amy. I didn't know if I cared. All I knew was that the warm breast in my palm felt wonderful. When will Amy come home? Soon. How soon? Too soon, she whispered. It turned out that 30 seconds had passed. We heard the garage door go up, so we had time to separate and take a few deep breaths. Amy walked up the stairs carrying 2 bags of groceries and said, Children, you weren't being capricious, were you? No, Lynn giggled. I didn't giggle. I guffawed. Today both twins had their hair down. They were both wearing jeans and t-shirts. They both wore pale purple lipstick. and they looked exactly the same. I couldn't tell them apart. Never. I couldn't tell which one I was in love with. My mind couldn't comprehend that the girl walking up the stairs was not the same girl I was with the night before. And the feeling that I had just kissed Amy was stronger than ever. "Do you need help moving things?" I asked. "Oh, no, thanks," Amy said and smiled at me, and Lynn smiled back at me. I felt it in all my bones. I needed to get out of there, right now. I had to think. I should have screamed. "Oh shit, is it already noon?" I asked. Lynn looked at the wall clock behind me. 12:15. "I forgot. I have to call my mom and tell her when I'm coming for dinner tonight. I always have dinner on Sunday with my family." "That's so sweet," Lynn said. "You can use our phone." "Actually, I have to go. I have things to do around the house." I smiled slyly at her. "I didn't plan on rushing here this morning." She smiled back. "Let me walk you to the car." At my car, she hugged me and kissed me on the lips. "This is madness. I just met you, and I feel like I know you so well." "Me too," I lied. "It can be so hard to trust someone that much, but I knew as soon as I met you that you would never do anything bad to me." "I would never," I said, and I meant it. "Go home, call your mom. I can't wait to tell her about the incredible girl I met." She liked it, she smiled, and her eyes sparkled. I kissed her goodbye. I watched her walk back into the house as I drove away. I drove about 100 meters, turned onto a side street, and parked. My hands were shaking. Was I crazy? Is it possible to imagine that these two girls, in turn, were with me? I couldn't imagine that Lynn would be so perverted as to do something like that. But did I even know who Lynn was? Who did I meet that first evening? Who did I go to dinner with? Whose breast did I touch? Were they all the same person? Did I really want to know? I started the car and drove home. I tried to think. The most obvious and direct solution was to ask Lynn if they had played a game with me. I could only imagine her reaction. Outrage would have been quite reasonable. No, I had to figure this out myself. Maybe I just have an overactive imagination? But I didn't think so. When I got home, I rummaged around in my desk and found a 3-subject notebook with a university paper. I took out a pen and wrote, 14th of April. I wrote a short description of what happened the evening I met Lynn. Then I took notes for the last 2 days. I called the next 2 sections, number 1 and number 2. The girl I met at the grocery store, I called number 1. I called the girl I just kissed number 2. I kept trying to build a dossier on each twin, trying to find tiny differences between them that would help me prove or debunk my hypothesis. That's what I called the woman I loved, number 1. The next 3 months did not help me solve the mystery. My friends loved Lynn when they met her, and they loved even more the fact that she had a twin sister. They asked me to accommodate them. I refused. I lied and told them that Amy had just gone through a bad breakup and wasn't ready to date. They asked me again and again, "How the hell do you tell them apart?" They harassed me, and I ignored them. I didn't ignore my dilemma. I was struggling to figure out if the twins were playing some sick game, or if I was the sick one. The results were inconclusive. I filled the notebook with observations, guesses, suspicions. I took a lot of photos of Lynn, and she never objected. I took a few pictures of the twins together, and again, no problem. I studied these photographs as carefully as a CIA analyst searches for nuclear sites in Iraq. My wild eye could not detect any obvious physical differences. None. 0. Same height, up to a centimeter. Same weight, up to a gram. The same smile, the same lips, the same eyes, the same hair. Both girls had beautiful hair, dark brown with streaks of brown and red. I tried to find subtle differences in the shades and patterns of these stripes, but could not. Their hair was identical, down to the individual strands. It wasn't just their faces that were the same. I started looking for tiny differences that wouldn't be easy to imitate. The problem was that they didn't have any tiny differences. No moles, no scars, no blemishes. Their skin was as clear as milk. Over the course of a week, I scrutinized Lynn's nails to see if, say, the nail on her index finger had grown half an inch. Nothing. I massaged her and memorized the pattern of freckles on her neck. They never changed. One evening, our kissing became even more intense than usual, and she took off her shirt and let me fondle her breasts. While I was caressing her, I carefully studied the shape, size, and taste of her breasts. The next 4 times I took her shirt off, they looked the same. They tasted the same. I searched the internet for tips on fingerprinting and analysis, but Lynn was always conscientious about cleaning up after dinner and washing the dishes, so I couldn't get fingerprints off her glasses. They seemed to be identical down to the molecular level. What about their friends? I hoped that the people who had known the twins the longest could help me understand the situation. It turned out that although Lynn and Amy were very friendly girls and knew a lot of people, they did not have what could be called close friends, buddies, or girlfriends. For this, they had each other. But they didn't live on the island, so I got to know their fellow teachers, neighbors, and a few friends from school. And each of them, 5 minutes after meeting, asked me the same question. So, you know how to distinguish them? Because I cannot. There was one girl, Donna, who could probably be called the twins' best friend. She went to school and college with them. She knew Lynn and Amy longer than anyone in the world. My gang went to a sports bar for a hockey game, and the twins brought Donna with them. At this point, I had been dating Lynn for about 2 months and was desperately searching for information that could either prove or disprove my hypothesis. During the first intermission, Lynn told me that Donna thought my friend Pete was cute. Donna was short, blonde, and perky, and Lynn asked me if I could put in a good word for her. I said sure. But when Lynn came back to the bar, I told Donna it would cost her dearly. Is it true? What do you want? I took her hand and sat her down on the seat next to mine. Information. For the next 15 minutes, I questioned Donna about Lynn. Most of the information she gave me was useless, but there was one topic we discussed that was very enlightening. I asked about Lynn's ex-boyfriends, and she replied, "Well, she doesn't have any." What? No one? She shook her head. I mean, she dated a lot of guys, both her and Amy, but neither of them ever had a real steady boyfriend. You are a record holder. It was hard for me to believe it, and I said so. I know we talked about this. I mean, the other girls in our group were still at school. Lynn was dating a guy, and Amy said she didn't like him. Amy was dating someone, and Lynn was shaking her head and saying she didn't understand what Amy saw in him. They had some pretty nasty fights over this. I can't imagine them quarreling. They never quarreled and never quarrel, except over boys. I don't know. Maybe when one is dating, the other is afraid of being abandoned, and they quarrel. I've never met 2 people who were closer to each other than Lynn and Amy. You have to remember that all the family they've ever had is themselves. I had one question to ask, and I drank the last 100 grams of my Rolling Rock before I mustered up the courage. Is Lynn a virgin? Her lips curled. I don't think I should answer this question. I shook my head. You're right. It would be wrong for me to even ask. A huge roar filled the bar as the penguins tied the match. Donna took a long sip of her beer and leaned forward. Yes, she does. Oh, I said, trying not to show my delight. Amy, too. I said, oh, again. The waitress came and I ordered another portion. I need to know something. Can you tell them apart? Is there a trick to this? Something that you understand since you've known them for so long? She shrugged and shook her head. I can't tell them apart. No one at school can either. She looked over my shoulder, making sure the twins were engrossed in their game. Lynn is better at math than Amy. Amy has good English. Back in high school and college, they swapped places on tests. Nobody ever noticed this. Me too. Lynn told me one evening when she had a little too much to drink. Wow, I said, more worried than I could have imagined. I know you don't think that such nice girls could do something, well, dishonest, but they did it. Our waitress placed 2 green bottles on the table, and I took a long sip from mine. I looked at Lynn, who was watching the game with a fierce expression on her face, and Donna took my hand to redirect my attention. She's a wonderful girl. I love her to death. If you hurt her, I'll kick your ass. A minute later, I was introducing Donna to Peta. I stayed long enough to let their conversation get heated, and then I left them and sat down in my seat, next to Lynn. What were you talking about? She wanted to warn me about what would happen if I ever hurt you. She's cruel, did you know that? She giggled. Then why are you setting her up with Pete? Because I don't like Pete. Do you even watch the game? Amy complained, and just as she turned, Mario Lemieux fired the puck between the goalie's legs. The bar exploded, and as I watched Amy's face turn from me to the screen and then bloom with an expression of joy, I remembered the same expression on the face of the girl I kissed under the lamppost in the park. I turned to my left and the same triumphant smile appeared on Lynn's face. I shouted something appropriate and let Lynn kiss me, but my heart was uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that the girl kissing me today was not the same girl I kissed the day before. It turned out that it was not just a feeling, because a few weeks later, I got some proof. The first time Lynn visited my house, I gave her a big tour. I made dinner, and we both cleaned up after it. A week later, Lynn came again, and I was very curious to see if Lynn knew the way. She passed the exam with flying colors. She knew where the bathroom was. When I asked her to get coffee from the cupboard, she knew which one to look in. The first time she came, she especially liked the photograph of Pittsburgh at night that hangs in my office. When she saw her again, she said, "I really like this photo," as if she had already commented on it before. But the first time Lynn came to see me, I showed her a photo of me and my mom when I graduated from college. It was on the table in my living room. When Lynn came the second time, I swapped the photos. It was still my graduation photo, but it was me and my Aunt Karen, my mother's sister. They are a little similar, but far from identical. It was a setup. I led Lynn over to the couch, sitting her down so she could see the photo. When we saw the movie and I went to get some popcorn, Lynn greeted me with a smile and pointed to the photo. "You really have your mother's eyes," she said. She said the same thing a week before, made the same remark about my mother. And now, she said the same thing about my aunt. I felt something twist inside me, twist tightly, and then snap shut. "Oh, I got something in my eye," I said. I ran to the toilet, flushed the toilet, and vomited into the churning whirlpool. It wasn't Lynn. It was Amy. Or, this time, it was Lynn, and Amy was here the week before. Or, to be consistent, number 2 was here today and number 1 was here before. 2 weeks later, Lynn and I were having dinner with my parents. I introduced her to Mom and Dad and watched her reaction closely, and she was alone. She smiled at my father with her megawatt smile, but when she shook my mother's hand, she hesitated for a moment. There was a flash of confusion. Then she regained her composure, her smile began to shine, and everything was fine. As we were leaving the restaurant, my mother grabbed my hand. "If you let her go, I will disown you." We said our goodbyes, and then Lynn and I walked back to my car. "Your mother looks different than I imagined," she said. There was a tiny note in her voice. "Like this?" I answered, with practical nonchalance. "That photograph that you have at home?" She didn't look what I expected. I held the door for her, but she didn't come in. She looked at me. She suspected something. I was gripping the door handle so hard I thought I might break it off. "Her hair is completely different now," I said. "They used to be straight, but now she wears them curly." Lie. My mother's hair has been curly since the day she was born. My Aunt Karen's are straight as rain. The girl standing in front of me looked at the photo for only 5 seconds. She thought and thought. I smiled at her, and then her face softened and she leaned against the door. "I like your parents. They adore you. They like you more than me." She kissed me. "Let's go home." We went to her house, sat on the couch, and I kissed Amy for an hour. But that was the only mistake I managed to catch her on. It's not that I didn't keep trying. One evening, while we were at my house watching a movie, I asked Lynn if Amy had shown interest in any of my friends. I was just fishing. "No," she answered. "Do you mind if I invite Rick over someday and invite you and Amy over to see if they can get along?" For the first time, I sensed a chill in Lynn's musical voice. "I don't think Amy will be interested." "Oh, good." Why are you so determined to set my sister up with someone? She was upset, but hid it. I'm not in the mood. Rick's just a nice guy. He thinks Amy is nice. She's not dating anyone. I threw this phrase, catching a little more. I know Rick is a good guy, and if Amy wanted to date him, she would have let him know. Then she said something that cooled my brain. Wouldn't it bother you? Wouldn't it seem strange to you if my sister was dating one of your friends? It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. Those blue eyes glared at me. She was angry. But the reason for her anger remained unspoken. Why should this bother me? I asked. Even if it bothered me, it would drive me crazy. If the twins really traded back and forth with me, the girl I loved would go to the movies with Rick. And this was completely unacceptable. Lynn still hasn't answered my question, so I asked it again. She paused, thinking. Then she said, "And if Amy starts dating Rick and it doesn't work out, wouldn't it be hard for him to see us together?" It was plausible. Her fears made sense, and it was nonsense. That wasn't what she was upset about. She was upset because if Amy started dating Rick, she would date Rick too. She was upset because both twins were dating me and didn't want to date anyone else. I know that sounds arrogant. Nothing could be further from the truth. She looked at me, and there was a challenge in her eyes. "Come on," her eyes said. "Ask." Or maybe I was just imagining it. Not that it matters. I didn't have the courage. "Well, I think I understand you." She smiled, I think relieved that I passed the test. "It's nice that you want Amy to be as happy as you made me." "Did I make you happy?" "Very happy." She kissed me, hard. I put my hands on her chest. She unbuttoned my shirt and ran her hands over my chest and stomach. Then her hand went down to my thigh. She said, "Honey, I want to do something with you." "With me?" "What?" I said, watching her hand move between my legs. Her tongue touched her upper lip. "I want you to feel good, Lynn." She began to unbuckle my belt. My breathing quickened. She didn't mean to. "No." "You're so big," she whispered. She didn't have to do this. I wanted to tell her that she didn't have to do that. I still loved her. I wanted to tell her this, but the words wouldn't come. She said, "I want to show you how much love I can give you." She gave me great pleasure. "Lynn, I love you," I said. I wondered what Lynn would be like in bed. She was so innocent that I thought she might not be so open sexually. Forget about it. I couldn't imagine her being a wild cat in bed. I didn't see that in her. And now she made me whine like a puppy, completely under her control. "I think you liked it," she giggled. "Oh, yes," I sobbed. I was in tears. I was confused. I was happy as only a person can be happy, and terribly confused. "Did you seriously say that you love me?" she asked. I looked into her eyes. "I fell in love with you as soon as I saw you." "Say it again." I repeated, and she said, "I love you too." And we lay there for a long time, hugging each other. She said, "I'm not ready for sex yet." "This is fine?" "Yes, of course, I was disappointed because I wanted to make love to her and because Amy was going out of town for a few days, and we had all the time we wanted to be alone." I looked into her bottomless blue eyes and ran my fingertips along the line of her jaw. "I can wait. Is it okay if I continue to pleasure you?" "I like it." I laughed. "No, everything is okay." It was too good to be true. And a few hours later, as I lay in bed and mentally replayed this scene, this thought stuck in my head. It was too good to be true. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened the bottom drawer. There was a notepad there. In it, I wrote my entry about the incredible events of that day. This part of the notebook was almost full, but the sections about number 1 and number 2 were not so heavily covered. But since Amy was out of town, and I was sure it was Amy because she was chaperoning a school field trip, I filled 2 pages with notes about number 1. That's when I came up with my theory about why Lynn wanted to wait before we made love. Because Amy wasn't there. Perhaps there was some kind of agreement between them. Maybe there was some kind of pattern to this. I met number 1. My first date was with number 2. It was number 1 who came to my house for the first time, number 2 who met my parents. It was number 1 that made me happy. And if my theory is correct, then the first time we made love would be with number 2. They must be witches, succubi. sucking the life out of me and leaving behind an empty husk. Those intense, meaningful glances they exchanged. What did they convey? Did they have one mind, divided between two identical bodies? They were binary souls, digital, 1 and 0, on and off. They created their own personal wireless internet, downloading each other's thoughts, memories, and experiences in nanoseconds, downloading gigabytes of data with just a tilt of their head. I realized that I was a little afraid of them. If they are capable of such monstrous deception, what else can they do? I didn't sleep well that night. I tossed and turned, trying to figure out a way out of this situation. I had to confront them, tell them I know their secret, tell them this has to stop now. But I didn't have the courage. What if they deny it? What then? How do I explain that for the last 3 months I suspected I was kissing Amy but didn't say anything about it? And, horror of horrors, what if I was wrong, but I was not mistaken? I eventually fell asleep, and when I woke up, I discovered that I had come up with another way to solve the problem. All I had to do was kill Amy. Problem solved. I ate a bowl of cereal and thought about the best way to kill the sister of the woman I loved. Her death will truly set me free. She will break Lynn's heart, but maybe it will only bring us closer. Trauma would have tied her to me so tightly that nothing could ever come between us. I can't say exactly how long I thought about killing Amy, but I ate 3 bowls of frosted mini-wheats while thinking about it. The practical problems were as daunting as the moral ones. Killing Amy wouldn't improve my chances with Lynn if she found out I did it, and I couldn't figure out how to do it and get away with it. Shoot her? Poison her? Run over her with a car? Hired killer? And how could I be sure that it was Amy who killed and not Lynn? To me, it still mattered, although now I couldn't be sure which of my fond memories were associated with Lynn and which were associated with Amy. It didn't matter. I wanted Lynn, or number 1, and I didn't know who she was. I couldn't risk killing her. I think this is all nonsense, all these conspiracies. I'm not a killer. I wouldn't hurt a fly. But my feelings for Lynn were so strong that there was nothing I wouldn't do to keep her. Anything but murder. I was sure that I would draw the line at murder. If I couldn't kill Amy, then perhaps I could mark her in such a way that Lynn couldn't do it again. If, say, I accidentally cut her shoulder so that it leaves a permanent scar, or throw boiling water on her and it leaves a red burn mark. That will work too. But I wasn't sure I could do anything truly terrible to Amy. I was either too cowardly or too decent to do anything irreversible. Draw the line. This gave me an idea that seemed so good at the time. I went to the local shopping center and wandered around for a bit. There was a large art supply store there with paints, brushes, canvases, and more. I wandered around the aisles for a bit and found a huge display of magic markers. I read the labels of a half-dozen types and finally chose one that said, "Permanent ink, stains fabric, avoid skin contact, cannot be removed with lady soap." Perfect. Amy returned to town 2 days later, so according to my theory, it was Amy who showed up at my door at 7 p.m. that Saturday. I had just put the fish in the oven when she appeared and asked, "How long until dinner?" "Maybe in 20 minutes." Her dark eyes sparkled with lust. "This time is just enough." I sat down on the sofa as she lowered herself onto me again. If it was Amy and the first time Lynn, then I couldn't tell the difference. We ate. I was still in a kind of fugue state. My mind was racing. If only I didn't have these terrible doubts about the woman sitting opposite me, I would be the happiest man on earth, and not a tormented wretch stuffing salmon into my mouth without tasting it. She helped me wash the dishes. While she was putting the last pan in the dishwasher, I opened the drawer and took out a marker. I took out the recipe card and pretended to make a note on it. I tested the marker on myself by simply placing a dot on my armpit. It was still there after 3 days of intense scrubbing. She, of course, faded, but resisted with all her might. The marker was in my right hand, hidden with my palm so that only the wet tip stuck out. "Thank you, honey," I said, as she closed the dishwasher. I extended my arms, she stepped into my arms, and when we pulled away, I reached for her hands. My right hand rested on her left, and the marker did its job. I said, "Oh shit," as he drew a 10-centimeter-long stripe from the center of her palm to her wrist. She looked at her hand. She looked at her for a long time. "Sorry, I thought I was wearing a cap, She went to the sink and washed her hand. "She doesn't come down." "Sorry, it's a permanent marker. It's not coming off," she interrupted, scrubbing the black line with a dish scraper. She scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed. I was afraid that she would be scraped until her flawless skin turned into raw meat. "Mike, she's not fucking coming down." This was the first time I heard her swear. Crap was her usual limit. My mouth was full of sand. I managed to blurt out, "It's okay, dear. It'll go away in a few days." "You did it on purpose?" She looked at me, and the light in her eyes went out. I managed a weak smile. "Why should I do this?" "I don't know," she said, but she knew. Otherwise, why would she be so upset? The kitchen was as quiet as a tomb. We stood and looked at each other like arrows. Neither of us said a word for a full 60 seconds. I didn't know what to say because what I wanted to say was unspeakable. I announced my suspicions by marking her with a marker. Now I was terrified. "I'm leaving," she said. She took her jacket from the chair. "Lynn, it was an accident. She didn't even look at me." Her jaw was clenched and her dark eyes were fierce. "Do not call me. Do not come to me. I do not want to see you." Before I could say another word, she disappeared. I was shocked. I looked out the window and saw her car driving out of my driveway. Before her taillights disappeared around the corner, the phone was in my hand. "Hello?" Amy's musical voice brought me to tears. I was so afraid that I would never again hear a kind word in those pleasant tones that, hearing them so soon, I lost control of myself. "Amy," I sobbed, "I need your help." "Mike, what's happened? Are you okay? Is Lynn there?" "She just left. We had a fight. What's happened?" She barked, instantly on edge. I told her about the last 5 minutes, about the marker, about the confrontation, about the exit. When I finished, I waited for Amy to say something. She didn't say. "Now." Silence. "Now." "You drew on it with a permanent marker." A statement, not a question. "No, I didn't draw on it. It was an accident." "You just happened to have a black permanent marker in your hand, and you just forgot to put the cap on, and then just massaged her hand. And you call this an accident?" "Yes." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, Amy's voice was exactly the same as Lynn's, with the same icy modulations. "Didn't you have plans to invite Lynn to dinner tomorrow?" "In Tin Angel?" "Yes." "She can't go to dinner at such a nice restaurant with a big black mark on her arm, can she? Maybe that's why she's so damn angry." The bones in my legs turned to jelly and I fell to my knees. Amy was angry because she was supposed to have dinner with me tomorrow night. Dinner and then home to kiss and cuddle. And if Lynn had a big black mark on her arm, Amy couldn't turn into Lynn, could she? Unless she marked her hand with black ink too. And then, they wouldn't be able to be seen together. Otherwise, everyone would ask, "Wow, you both did the ink with a marker?" "Amy, it was an accident." "You're not clumsy, Mike." There was a pause. Lynn just pulled into the driveway. So fast. She must have been driving like a maniac. "Amy, please give her the phone, please." "Wait. Now." "What?" "Please tell her that I love her. Please, I love her." No answer. She hung up, and then I heard muffled voices in the background. I couldn't make out the words. No one answered the phone for 5 minutes. I screamed into the phone, trying to get both twins' attention. When I heard the phone picked up, I held my breath. "Hello?" Pause. Then a voice trembling with sobs. "Mike, don't call here again. If you call back, it will all be over. I need to think. You understand?" I replied that I understood. Before I could say a word, the line went dead. I hung up. I didn't even know which twin gave the ultimatum. Did it matter? Staggering, I went to the kitchen. I drank a beer, then another, then another. I drank myself into a stupor because that was the only way I could sleep. I slept and had no dreams, only a continuous stream of blackness before my eyes. In Lynn, all my dreams came true, and all my nightmares too. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the second final part. The link to the second part will be in the description of this video below.